Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Rogue Health Economist. I'm your host, James Maskell, and I'm super excited to be here on a special live stream interview with one of my good friends from the functional medicine community and one of the leaders in an exciting new field called predictive autoimmunity. Welcome, Dr. Tom O'Brien.
Thank you, James. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you, my friend.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and I'm super excited for today because I created this podcast, this live cast, to really focus on the potential that functional medicine could have to transform the health cost trajectory of our costs here in America, but also everywhere else around the world that's dealing with chronic illness. So the first question that I want to share with you or ask you is, this week is Chronic Disease Week. And I guess the first thing that I want to ask is, autoimmune disease and the autoimmune sort of function that we're going to be talking about today, how big a deal is it?
Oh, it's the biggest deal. We know that atherosclerosis, the plugging up of your pipes that causes cardiovascular disease, initiates with an autoimmune process. We know that Alzheimer's, killing off of brain cells, is an autoimmune process. That all of the diagnosed autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid, MS, psoriasis, alopecia, losing your hair, celiac, the diagnosed number is somewhere around 70 million people in the US are diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. What is that? That's about 1 out of 5 in the US. And the numbers are just exponentially increasing every year because as a culture, we're getting sicker and sicker, much more so than the rest of the world, which is why this whole concept of the Rogue Health Economist is so important, that people need to get a grasp of what can I do with my family that's going to change the trajectory of where my whole community is going with disease. So we need to change our paradigm. So first, to understand that your immune system, when activated to protect you, creates collateral damage that gets diagnosed eventually as an autoimmune disease. That's a critically important concept to understand.
And we had Dr. Bland on here last week, and he said that anywhere from 10 to 20 million Americans are on autoimmune biologicals. And we know that those don't come cheap.
No, they're some of the most expensive and most profitable of pharmaceuticals. And they have so much collateral damage as pharmaceuticals. We call it comorbidities that occur and contraindications. But when people are at that stage where their disease has progressed to a particular point, and the doctors they're seeing know that they don't know how to stop the direction they're going in. So these medications will help them feel better for a little bit. But, there's no question, this is not going to stop the disease. This is not going to extend your lifespan. There are no studies showing that these biologicals extend your lifespan. They reduce some of the current suffering, which is really important. Yeah. And if you need the meds, you take them. But also asking the question, why is my immune system doing this, is a critical question to ask.
Absolutely. So last week we had Christina Tidwell on, and she was talking, it was Immune Week last week, and she, shared how she had, reversed her autoimmune disease with functional medicine. And there was a time where biologicals were used at the beginning before she knew better, and actually to help sort of on the journey. But ultimately there was a goal of what she is now, which is self-efficacious. Doesn't need the medical system, off all the medications, knows how to run her life in a way that leads to no flares, no recurrence, those kind of things. And I know that you've helped a lot of people on that journey. And I guess I just love to ask you, before we get into some of the details, what does it mean on a human level, right, to not be reliant on doctors and drugs in the system? Like for a human, what does it mean to a person for that to happen?
Oh, you asked the question, and the song from George Michael's on freedom just came into my mind, right? Just freedom. That when you know that you're living a clean lifestyle in terms of how you take care of this vehicle that we've got, and you're feeling good and you're sleeping well, your bowels are working well, and you're excited by life, you look forward to today and tomorrow. That's what I think of for freedom with physical function, that my body doesn't need any help, any medications to suppress particular symptoms. Or, you know, if you've been diagnosed with depression, you may need antidepressants for a while. But just go on Google and type in depression and inflammation. Here come all the studies. So when you ask the question, why am I inflamed? You know, or why do I have depression? And you see that every depression patient they check, moderate and major depression, every single one of them have high markers of inflammation, meaning their immune system is activated to try to protect them from something. And you ask the question, where is that inflammation coming from? And then you learn that the most common source of the gasoline on the fire, the inflammation, is what's on the end of your fork. And then you ask the question, well, what am I eating that may be inflammatory? That sets you on a path where, from personal experience, you start realizing, when I eat this, the next day I feel like crap, right? And you start realizing some of that. I mean, it's great to do the testing if you have access to and you can afford the testing. There's really good testing out now called the Zoomers. The technology is really great, like never before in history. But if you can't afford the testing, or you don't have a doctor that knows about this kind of stuff, you just start being observant in your life. When you have a really bad day, ask the question, what did I eat yesterday? What might have contributed to more inflammation, more depression, or more joint pain, or more sluggish thyroid, or whatever your symptom pattern is?
Absolutely. Well, look, I really want to get into the autoimmune stuff, because I just see with those numbers that you've shared and that I've heard you lecture on, you know, for the last few years, I realize that we're kind of running out of time, right? We're running out of time to which we will be overwhelmed with the cost of chronic disease in so many of these conditions. And one of the things you shared with me is just how many of these conditions start with the same process. And so what I'd love to do for you to do today, I know you brought some slides, but take us through here, just sort of like the baseline of autoimmune disease and predictive autoimmunity, because ultimately this is an area of functional medicine that I think that if everyone understood, and especially for the economists out there and the health economists who are thinking, how do we control the cost of chronic disease? How do we bring down the cost of chronic disease? And this one piece that you're going to bring, I think if it was really understood by a wider community, we would be having a lot more of a progressive conversation about how functional medicine should be delivered in the system. So let's just start from there, and then we can get into some of the conversation. But I'm grateful.
You bet. You bet. Thank you for that, James. It really is my passion, and it's thanks to our friend, Dr. Jeff Bland, that kind of guided me in this direction so many years ago. It's 12 years ago now, and I've been teaching about these concepts since then, and before, but on this autoimmune aspect for the last 12 years. So the Alzheimer's Association came out last year and said 1 out of 3 elders in the US will die with Alzheimer's or another dementia. 1 out of 3. That means, James, between you and me and you, the listener, one of the 3 of us are going down with brain dysfunction. And it ain't going to be me. I hope not, anyway. But those kinds of numbers are so startling. But then you look, and Newsweek did something back in 1996 or 97, their cover story. Alzheimer's is a decades-long disease. It takes decades before your brain is so damaged that it doesn't function adequately anymore, and you finally get a diagnosis. So what's the mechanism that's going on for decades that eventually leads to a diagnosis of Alzheimer's? Or for decades that eventually leads to a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis? Or for decades that eventually leads to a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, or any of the other ones, these degenerative diseases? There's decades-long processes. So I want to show you a couple of studies that just drop my jaw. when I saw them. So I'm going to share my screen here and bring them up. And let's just go right to it about the spectrum of autoimmunity. What do I mean by that? I mean that when the mechanism begins, if you get diagnosed with rheumatoid, you suffer, you go to a doctor, you get diagnosed with rheumatoid, you didn't just get rheumatoid. It's been going on for at least 14 years, but you didn't know because the symptoms weren't bad enough. So there's a spectrum from when this thing begins and when the damage is so accumulative, now you get diagnosed with the disease. You didn't get the disease here. So let me show you this. And this paradigm shifting study was in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2003. Melissa Arbuckle went to the VA and she looked for people with lupus in one VA center. She found 130 patients with lupus in this one VA center. Now they're in a VA center. That means they're veterans. If they're veterans, they were in the armed forces. And if they were the armed forces, they had their blood drawn many, many times over the years while they were healthy in the Navy or the Air Force or the Army, Marines. And what most people don't know is that the VA services, our government's been saving most of that blood since 1978. They've got tens of millions of samples of our service people's blood frozen. Arbuckle knew this, so she went back and asked for permission to look at the blood of the currently diagnosed lupus patients when they were healthy. And she got permission, and what did she find? Antibodies are present years before the diagnosis of lupus. Further, the appearance of these antibodies in patients with lupus tends to follow a predictable course with a progressive accumulation of the antibodies before the onset, while patients still feel fine. They don't have any problems, but these antibodies are increasing inside of them. Their immune system is making antibodies against their own tissue. And she put these drawings in there that there are 7 different antibodies that create lupus. And you see in both A and B, let's look at the bottom one first, graph B. And you see 5 years before there was any symptoms whatsoever, the first manifestation. 5 years beforehand, every single one of the antibodies were elevated. 0 means normal. And the first one, the gray one, is 8% above normal. The second one's about 18% above normal. The third one, about 30, and it goes up from there. And you see every one of them increase, 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 increase. And you see when the first symptoms that a person has is 5 years before. Now, some of these antibodies were elevated 11 years beforehand. Now, what does it mean to have antibodies elevated? Let me just get us straight on that first. When you do a blood test to see if you have a problem with your thyroid, and they look, and I'll use thyroid as an example, but it could be your heart tissue or any other tissue. They look to see what's the level of antibodies to your thyroid. And there's a normal reference range between 0 and 43 from most labs, sometimes 46, somewhere in there. And Mrs. Patient, you have an entire new body every 7 years. Every cell in your body regenerates, except your teeth, every other cell. Some are really quick, some are really slow. How does that happen? Your immune system has to get rid of the old and damaged cells to make room for the new cells. And that's how we reproduce new cells, hopefully healthier cells, younger cells. But the way you make room and catalyze that is that the immune system gets rid of the old and damaged cells. So you have a normal reference range of antibodies to your thyroid. But when you have elevated antibodies to your thyroid, you're killing off more cells than you're making. And that's what we mean by elevated antibodies. And here in this study on the autoimmune disease lupus, they showed that every single antibody to lupus was elevated 5 years before they ever had a symptom. And it kept going up and up and up and up, damaging tissue, damaging tissue, damaging tissue, damaging tissue, until eventually so much tissue was damaged that now you start getting symptoms from that tissue not being able to work very well anymore.
Tom, it reminds me of, obviously with diabetes, right? There's the term pre-diabetes is quite well known now. People
Right.
understand that there's a place that you are where you don't quite have diabetes, but like the tissue is breaking down. And I think what you're saying here is that there's a pre-phase for, in this case, lupus, but I guess a lot of
Any
issues.
autoimmune disease. Yeah, that's exactly right, James. And when your doctor says, well, you're pre-diabetic right now, that is the time to get aggressive on how do I reverse the direction my blood sugar regulating system is going. And that doesn't take a lot of tests. That's just realizing, okay, my blood sugar's out of balance, I'm pre-diabetic, and what triggers that imbalance mechanism in your insulin function called insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance? It's what's on the end of your fork.
Yeah.
That is the primary trigger. There's another trigger, and that's the accumulation of toxic chemicals in your body that affects blood sugar stability. But primarily, it's what's on the end of your fork. So if you're pre-diabetic, it means the way you're eating is not working.
Yeah.
And I've had so many patients that come in and say, well, doc, I got the sugar. I just got diagnosed with diabetes, meaning they've known for years that they're pre-sugar, pre-diabetic. And then one day, yep, all right, I got it. It's like it was a sentence that they had no control over. You can arrest all of that so quickly and so thoroughly by just learning how to feed the body to stabilize insulin sensitivity.
And I guess just one other question on this graph, like what I don't see is that any of these numbers anywhere go down at all, right? It's always up and to the right. But I know from working in functional medicine that getting an ANA number to go down is actually very possible.
Very possible, not difficult at all. And that's a good observation on your part, because the lifestyle these people are living has continued to this point.
Yes.
They haven't changed anything about their environment or about what's on the end of their fork or about the chemical accumulations in their body, which is strongly associated with lupus. They've not looked at the why. Why is this happening to me? Which is a question we all need to investigate for ourselves, usually with the help of a functional medicine practitioner or functional medicine books like my books or Mark Hyman's books or your books, and just start asking the question and looking for some answers. And if we don't do that, the direction your body is going in continues. And it's not the direction you want. That's a really good observation, James, on your part. So she came up with this. And she said, and this is her summary of all 7 antibodies, where the number of antibodies are elevated. In this case, she summarized it at 6 years before there was ever a symptom. And after you get the symptoms and you go into docs, in her example here in the VA system, it took about 8 months or so before you got the right diagnosis. You had to go back again and again and again because it wasn't so severe, it was obvious. But then you get the diagnosis, you got lupus. Then you're put on the medications to help you feel a little better, reducing the symptomatology, but the mechanism is never addressed as to what's going on.
Got it.
And then she drew this one. She said, we have normal immunity. That's like having a normal amount of antibodies to your thyroid or to your brain or your liver, or your kidneys. That's normal to have some antibodies. Then you have benign autoimmunity, which means you don't have any symptoms. You've got elevated antibodies, but there's no symptoms. Then you start getting some symptoms. There's a pathology going on. And then you get diagnosed with a disease. And notice what's above and below the directions that it's going. Your genes set you up as to what autoimmune diseases you're vulnerable to. And then the environment that you're in is what activates this whole process. That's the takeaway, is that it's the environmental factors that are required in the presence of a genetic vulnerability that activate the autoimmune mechanism. And the classic one that we know of is celiac disease. And what's the environmental trigger? Everyone knows it's gluten. Don't eat wheat. and you don't get celiac disease. That's what she's showing here way back in 2003. Now, I summarized that. There's a really famous professor that, James, I know you've met him at the IFM annual symposium. I think it was last year, Professor Yehuda Schoenfeld.
Yep.
From Tel Aviv University. He's the godfather of all of this. And what do I mean by that? When I interviewed him for Betrayal in 2016, at that time, 28 of the PhD students who received their PhD in immunology under him, there are many more, but 28 chaired departments of immunology in med schools and hospitals around the world. He's the godfather. And he said here that individuals who are at risk of developing an autoimmune disease should be advised to refrain from activities and lifestyle which endangers their health and quality of life. And in the immortal words of Rosanna Dana, it's like, you think?
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes sense, right?
And look, someone has to advise them, should be advised to refrain. And ultimately, I don't think, first of all, conventional medicine doesn't understand what you just said, even though it's in their literature. And they don't understand that, that refraining from activities and lifestyles which endanger their health and quality of life, you have to have a certain level of understanding of that whole process in order to make that, advisement.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And unfortunately, the training for this in our medical schools is just beginning. It's really just beginning. And you can see this paper in Lupus of Professor Schoenfeld's was 14 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's still just beginning. Why? Because when we've invited the deans of medicine from different medical schools all over the world as a guest to our 5-day program at IFM, at the Institute for Functional Medicine, they come in and they just sit there and they're shocked by what they hear because it all makes such perfect sense. And in the meetings we have with them, they always say the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's someone from Oxford or Harvard or the Kansas State University School of Medicine. They all say the same thing. It'll take us 15 years to get this in our curriculum because they've got to go back and talk to the Dean of Gastroenterology, who has a fiefdom. Well, I'm the Dean of Gastroenterology at Harvard, and I decide who our professors will be and what textbooks we use. And they've had a 40-year career, but this is new information. And so they're not going to embrace it and change their whole paradigm until they've spent years studying this and seeing how credible it is and how it's on the right track. That's why I've got a study somewhere in my presentations that the title of the study is "The Answer is 17 Years." The question, how long before translational research is implemented in clinical practice? Yeah. That when you publish translation, I mean, change the way you think, research, the average is 17 years before the docs down the street are using this information. That there's just this delay of a decade or 2 decades before it becomes common knowledge.
Absolutely.
For example, I'll give you one example. Our friend, Professor Alessio Fasano, he's the chair of pediatric gastroenterology at Mass General at Harvard and the director of the Mucosal Immunology Institute at Harvard. He's the guy that identified the mechanism by which leaky gut occurs. And he identified that protein in 1997. And we think he'll win a Nobel Prize for this because it changed the whole paradigm of how we all think in medicine. But when he first published that, so many gastroenterologists saying, oh, that's utter nonsense. Well, what is a leaky gut? There's no such thing as a leaky gut. Well, I started talking about it when I opened my practice in 1980 because I'd heard Dr. Jeff Bland talking about these early studies about what's happening in the gut and the possibility of that. But now, Professor Fasano, there are still a few gastroenterologists who say there's no such thing as a leaky gut, but there are literally thousands of studies on it now in the medical literature, and is commonly accepted in every med school. But he identified this in 1997, and here we are now over 20 years later, and it's just being implemented, and looked at and looking for medications to fix this. And we've shown so many times that diet, what's on the end of your fork, has a direct correlation with it.
Beautiful.
So I wanted to show you a summary because of Professor Schoenfeld saying, you know, you should really take a look at this and see. So many studies have come out since Dr. Arbuckle's study in 2003 that we've been able to put these together, that if you have any antibodies to lupus, that's SLE, is lupus, the positive predictive value, the PPV, that you're going to get lupus is 94 to 100% within 7 to 10 years. You get lupus. For scleroderma, the autoimmune disease scleroderma, if you have either of these antibodies elevated, it's 100% within 11 years. You're going to get scleroderma. For rheumatoid, it depends on the antibody. It's 52 to 97%. Your joints are going to be all deformed, and you'll have rheumatoid within 14 years. Sjogren's, primary antiphospholipid syndrome, especially the bottom one there, anti-beta-2 glycoprotein 1, which is so very common with unexplained miscarriages. If you've got any of these antibodies elevated, it's 100% within 11 years. You're having primary antiphospholipid syndrome. And with Hashimoto's thyroid, it's 92% within 7 to 10 years. If you got elevated TPO antibodies, especially after a pregnancy, within 7 to 10 years, your thyroid's not going to be working very well at all. You'll have the autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's. And diabetes and primary biliary sclerosis and Addison's disease and Crohn's disease and celiac. If you've got either of the antibodies for celiac elevated, it's 50 to 60%. But if you also have the gene, it's 100% within 7 years. You're going to have celiac. So when we understand that these markers are harbingers of what's coming down the pike, that these mechanisms are going on inside your body right now, especially for those people who have a family history of particular autoimmune diseases, which means you probably carry the gene. Now, the question is, does the gene get turned on or not? But especially for those people, it makes sense to check and see, do I have any elevated antibodies to my own tissue right now? I feel fine, or I feel good enough. Or if you're not feeling very well, make sure that your doctor is also checking you for an autoimmune condition related to whatever your symptoms are, right? I mean, it's just critically important, because if you identify this and you understand, all right, that mechanism's going on. I don't know how long it's been going on. This is the first time I've tested for it, but I know I've got a window here. I haven't killed off so much tissue yet that I've got immobilizing pain and enough to have a diagnosis of rheumatoid or whatever it is. How am I going to turn this thing around? It kind of winds you up, like, you know, the old Model T cars, or it gives you a kick in the pants to really focus on this, to see how can I turn around the inflammatory cascade that's going on in my body. Now, I've got 2 case studies that I thought I'd show you to give you an idea of where some of these autoimmune conditions come from that are there for years before you have symptoms. So the first one is a 43-year-old guy with an 8-month history of patchy hair. He just started losing his hair. Now, how long was it going on before he started losing his hair? Just think rheumatoid and joint pain. But for alopecia, it's hair loss. How many years was it going on beforehand? No one knows, because they didn't go back and look at blood tests beforehand. But here he presents with a complaint, like you might when your symptoms get bad enough, you go to a doctor, you've got a complaint, and it was hair loss. And here's where the hair loss was. And they show you the chin here, because you see there's no stubble there. That's also alopecia, not just on the head, but also on the chin. That's alopecia. And he went to a dermatologist for his hair loss, and they gave him the steroid creams for hair loss, and they also put him on an antidepressant. Well, you know, I'd be a little depressed if I was losing my hair, I guess, but none of it worked. But they found out Somebody else, another doc that he saw, found out that, he had dyspepsia. And he said, well, why do you have dyspepsia? So they checked him, and that's like heartburn and gaseous pains. And they found out he had a bacterial infection called Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori. Very, very common. And so they put him on the medications, the antibiotics, to kill the bacteria. You got a bacterial infection, we have to kill this bacteria. And they told him to stop taking all that medication for the hair loss, and it's not working, you've been on it, it's not working. Just get rid of this bacteria. The Helicobacter infection was gone within 6 weeks. They rechecked him, and everything was normal after 6 weeks. And here's his hair loss when he first came in. And there is the lack of hair growth on the chin. That's another manifestation for our healthcare practice, or any of you out there, guys, when you shave, if you see there's an area there's not much stubble, that's alopecia. And here he was 4 weeks later, and 4 weeks on antibiotics, and his hair's growing back. This is like, what? His hair's growing back. And here he is at 8 weeks, 16 weeks, 44 weeks. Now he's all done with the antibiotics, but the trigger is now gone. It's gone, and his hair's growing back. And this is how it looked in the study. They just showed the different time frames in there. That when they got rid of the bacteria, his hair grew back. Now we know that Helicobacter can cross-react with your own tissue, meaning your body fights this bacteria, and because the protein structure of the bacteria, some of it looks a little bit like your own cells, your body can start attacking your own cells. And that's called a cross-reactivity or molecular mimicry. It mimics the triggering agent. And this occurs not only in your stomach, but also with these diseases like thrombocytopenic purpura, or Hashimoto's thyroid disease, or atherosclerosis. The plugging up of your pipes occurs because the immune system's attacking a bacteria sometimes. And hypertension and angina, pain in your chest, Alzheimer's, sclerosis. You see autoimmune pancreatitis, all these different diseases that can be because of a bacteria. And when you get rid of the bacteria, the inflammation in that tissue calms down. So that's the first study. It's like, what? Now I'm going to show you one more study, because what's on the end of your fork, how often that has something to do with it. And this is a food-related molecular mimicry. So here's a 3-year-old girl who had been diagnosed with celiac disease. And when the gastroenterologist did the endoscopy, they put her under a general anesthetic, they put a tube down the throat, and they take pictures of the intestines, snip out a little piece, look at it under a microscope. The gastroenterologist came back and said, your daughter's got celiac disease. Put her on a gluten-free diet right now. And the parents said, okay. But there's something wrong with your daughter's eye. We're going to get you to an ophthalmologist right away. So a few days later, they're in the ophthalmologist's office. And what the ophthalmologist found was this tumor on the eyeball. The little girl's looking down right now, and they lift the eyelid up. That's a tumor on the eye that they had diagnosed as Kaposi sarcoma. That comes from HIV, because mom was positive for HIV. But the little girl's blood test was not positive for HIV. So they said, well, what is this? We don't know. And they said, well, parents, we need to put your daughter under general anesthesia, and we need to take a sample of this tumor to see what it is. And the parents said, no, please. Our daughter has not responded yet completely from the general anesthetic a few days ago for the endoscopy and the diagnosis of celiac disease. We put her on a gluten-free diet right away, but she's not responding. Can we wait a few days until she's back to normal, and then we'll come back, and of course we'll do whatever we have to do. The doctor said, okay. So they waited a few days and they come back. And what did they find? Well, this is 1 week on a gluten-free diet. And this is 2 months on a gluten-free diet. They didn't do anything else, because they came back and the ophthalmologist was going to put her under general, but he took a look in the eye and said, well, wait a minute. And he went back and got the picture they had taken a few days earlier and said, look at this. Parents, we're going to watch this. We're not going to do anything here. Let's just watch it. And within 2 months, it was completely gone on a gluten-free diet with no other treatment. And the author said, oh, it's not there. It's not there. But the author said, this is an autoimmune mechanism secondary to celiac disease. We've never heard of this before, but this is molecular mimicry secondary to celiac disease. So this is an example of when your immune system, trying to protect you, fighting wheat, was going after her eyeball. And in the other example, the immune system, trying to protect you, going after Helicobacter pylori, went after his hair follicles. That's called molecular mimicry, and that is the primary mechanism being identified as to why these autoimmune mechanisms occur. If you remember Dr. Arbuckle's drawing, genetics are on top and the environmental triggers underneath. So for the hair loss, his genes were for hair loss. The environmental trigger was the bacteria. For this girl, the gene was for celiac. The environmental trigger was wheat, and the gene and manifested on her eyeball. So there's one other topic I want to show you about, and that's, I mentioned our friend Dr. Fasano, Alessio Fasano, who identified about intestinal permeability, the leaky gut, back in 1997. And people like that, they're quoted all the time. And people at that level are very, very careful of what they say because they know how easy it is to be misquoted. I want to show you the article that just came out in January of this year from Professor Fasano. And if you look at the title of the article, all disease begins in the leaky gut, and the role of the protein zonulin and gut permeability, that's leaky gut, in the genesis of chronic inflammatory diseases throughout the body. So we have the chair of pediatric gastroenterology saying all disease begins in the leaky gut. And this paper goes through the whole mechanism of how that occurs, and it'll manifest wherever your genetic vulnerability is. Maybe it's for celiac, maybe it's for alopecia, maybe it's for rheumatoid, but it begins in the gut. And that's where we all can begin addressing it. And you calm down that fire. And I'll show you just one point that Professor Fasano said. Among the several triggers that can stimulate too much zonulin, small exposure to large amounts of bacteria and gluten, the protein causing celiac disease, have been identified as the two most powerful triggers. Every time you eat wheat, you trigger transient intestinal permeability. Every single time it comes out of the stomach. Why is that? And this is the last slide that I wanted to show you here to give you food for thought. Gluten is now this is the chair of pediatric gastroenterology at Harvard. Gluten is misinterpreted by the body as a harmful component of a bug. That every time you eat wheat, it triggers the defense in our small intestine called toll-like receptor 4. Now that is the immune defense mechanism we all have, our ancestors had, because when our ancestors found some food to eat, they pick it up, they smell it, they taste it, then they swallow it. If there's bacteria that shouldn't be there, bad bacteria that comes through the stomach, toll-like receptor 4 gets activated, causing the inflammatory cascade, the inflammatory response in the body. Gluten activates toll-like receptor 4 every time you eat it. So the body misinterprets this food as a bug. And then automatic response mechanism is to protect you. So it triggers that whole inflammatory cascade. The inflammation causes the leaky gut, and then you're off to the races with systemic inflammation. Wherever your genetic vulnerability is, that's where you're vulnerable to developing an autoimmune disease. That's like a 15-minute summary of a PhD thesis.
Well, show us the wheel there, Tom, and how it affects all those different diseases, because I feel like that is the critical thing to look at, is that, you know, there's such a range of chronic diseases that are causing so much cost in our system. And ultimately, you know, what I'm interested in doing in this show is just looking at solutions by way which we could actually reduce the cost. And I think that what you're hitting on here is potentially like a central mechanism that we could shift, and shift quickly, because ultimately, like with Fine Functional right now, we have an ability where over the next, say, 5 years, we could take tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people and help them do something. So what should we have them do?
We sure could. We sure could. So if you understand that wheat and bacteria cause this leaky gut, Mrs. Patient, your gut is a tube from the mouth to the other end, one big long tube. The inside of the tube is lined with a cheesecloth. Now, if you think of the gut like a donut, and you stretch the donut out, just one big long donut, and you look down the hole of the donut, that's your digestive tract, that's your gut. So when you swallow food, it's in the tube. It's not in the body yet. It's in the tube. It's got to go through the walls of the tube, through the walls of the intestines into the bloodstream. Our vitamins, our minerals, our nutrients have to go through the walls into the bloodstream. Well, the tube is lined with a cheesecloth. So only really small molecules can get through the cheesecloth into the bloodstream. That's the whole process of digestion, is like a pair of scissors on a pearl necklace. Snip, now you got 2 clumps. Snip, now you got 4 clumps. Snip, 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 until each pearl of the pearl necklace, called an amino acid, is so tiny it goes right through the cheesecloth. That's how we absorb our nutrients. When you get tears in the cheesecloth, you get these bigger molecules getting through that shouldn't be able to get through yet. They're called macromolecules. And they get into the bloodstream, and your immune system says, whoa, what's that? I can't use that to make new bone cells or brain cells. I better fight that thing. Now you make antibodies to fight chicken or turkey or tomatoes or cantaloupe or whatever the macromolecule is that got through. And when you make the antibodies to chicken or tomato or cantaloupe or wheat, because of molecular mimicry and your genetic vulnerability, those antibodies to different foods or different bacteria they got in can start attacking your own tissue. That's the whole mechanism that Professor Schoenfeld's talking about the development of autoimmunity. And the way it'll manifest is wherever your genetic vulnerability is. And the more of this toxic crud that gets through the bacteria that Professor Fasano's talking about, it's called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. It's the exhaust of this gram-negative bacteria. It gets through and it starts to accumulate in your body. And that's the third one on the right there, bacteria endotoxin. Gets into the bloodstream. Then you get a systemic inflammatory response syndrome. Just go to Google and type in depression and inflammation. Here come all the studies on how inflammation is the trigger for every depressive patient they look at. They've all got inflammation, every single one of them. And when they're successful in getting rid of the inflammation, the depression goes into remission. So it may be affecting your brain, or it could be affecting cancer or renal, your kidneys or your lungs or your digestive system or your heart, or any system of your body may be affected depending on where this LPS is accumulating. Now, the outer ring is when you're first starting to accumulate this stuff, and the color is your genetic vulnerability. But as you start going closer to center, and you get the systemic inflammatory immune response, and then you get sepsis, and 1.7 million people in the US get sepsis every year, of which 250,000 die every year from, my mother died from this, so I'm really sensitive to this. That's why I know this one. And the stuff accumulates and your immune system's activated trying to attack this stuff. And this is a primary component of the cytokine storm in this current virus epidemic that we've got. And people that have this cytokine storm that occurs, they've loaded with all of this endotoxin in their body. And that's put them at risk for the aggressive response that they get. This is what develops over decades, is this stuff because of the tears in the cheesecloth that has been going on, and we don't feel that. We don't have a problem with that. But then these toxins accumulate throughout the body for decades.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, this is
So
such a great graph, and I really think that we're hitting on to like the middle of the middle here, the middle of like what is it
exactly,
going to take to make an
exactly. And
impact?
I didn't tell you this ahead of time, but I've got a recommendation for a 5-step approach to heal the gut. You know
Let's
that
take us off the screen and then share it with us.
yeah, you bet. You bet. Let's do that. So let's stop share. There we go.
Give us the
So
5 steps.
the, critically important, Mrs. Patient, when you go shopping, now first you have to understand that the microbiome of your gut controls the environment of the gut. 70% of the immune system is in the gut. And if you have an inflammatory environment, you have a very activated immune system. So what we want to do is build the microbiome to a very healthy, diverse, anti-inflammatory microbiome. That's the goal.
Yep.
Your microbiome has its hands on the steering wheel of how your body functions. We call it modulating. And just turn the steering wheel 5 degrees. 100 yards down the road, you're off the road, right? It doesn't take much. And so we want if there's only one thing you're going to do to be healthy, I believe in my heart and soul, this is it. Nothing is more important than this. Now, symptomatic relief for whatever you've got going on, but when you want a healthier body, you always want to include as a primary reducing the inflammation and building a more diverse, healthy microbiome. Here's the 5-step process. When you go shopping for food, always buy organic, really important for many reasons if it's available. If it's not, you say to the manager of the grocery department, how come you don't have organic carrots? Well, we just don't. Well, if you get them, I'll buy them. And if they get 10 people a week, every week asking, the produce manager every day, someone's asking for organic, it won't take long before he says to the store manager, we might want to try this and see how it goes, right? So get organic whenever you can. Get a couple of every root vegetable in the store. Every root vegetable. Why? Root vegetables, get rutabagas and turnips and parsnips and radishes and sweet potatoes and carrots. Not too many white potatoes because of the blood sugar problems with too many white potatoes, but all the other root vegetables. And every day you have at least one root vegetable. Well, I don't know how to cook a rutabaga. Well, neither do I. All I do is slice an onion, chop up the rutabaga, peel some garlic, a little coconut oil, a little avocado oil in the pan, saute it all together till it's soft, add a little peanut sauce or red Thai chili sauce or gluten-free soy sauce, whatever you want, and I eat it. You don't have to be Julia Child. Well, what about turnips? I slice an onion, chop up the turnip, a little bit of garlic, throw it in the pan, coconut oil, avocado oil, saute it up till it's soft, add a little sauce to it, and I eat it.
Yep.
You don't have to be Julia Child for this. You just got to get it down there because root vegetables feed the good bacteria in your gut. They're called a prebiotic to feed the good bacteria, the probiotics in your gut. And you don't want to just eat sweet potatoes every day. I mean, they're good for you, but you want different root vegetables because the fiber of each root vegetable feeds different bacteria in your gut. So you alternate it. Part 2 of number 1. Go on Google and type in list of prebiotic foods. PRE, prebiotic foods. Print out the list. Put it on your refrigerator, and you'll find out that onions are a prebiotic. Bananas are a prebiotic. You don't need to eat weird stuff like chicory root. It's good for you, but you don't need to eat that weird stuff, right? You'll find many normal foods are prebiotics. And you include 2 from the list and 1 root vegetable every day. We're changing the lifestyle, slowly changing the lifestyle so that you're feeding you and your family the foods to build a healthier microbiome.
Beautiful.
Part 2, Mrs. Patient, for a couple of months, I want you to take a commercial prebiotic because when you get off wheat, you have to replace the prebiotics in wheat with other. So I just want to make sure you got plenty of the good food. So for 2 months, I personally recommend Mega Prebiotic, but there are many commercial prebiotics out there that you can use.
Okay.
But for a couple of months, use a prebiotic. I take it every day. It's in my smoothie. My wife and I take it, but I'm not asking you to do that. Just 2 months. Patients will do it for 2 months. You know, they'll comply for a couple of months. That's part 2. Part 3, get 5 different types of fermented vegetables. Get sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, fermented beets, curry flavored, whatever you want, but get a number of different types. And every day you have a forkful or 2 of fermented vegetables. Why? Because every vegetable that ferments produces families of really good bacteria. So you're inoculating yourself with the good bacteria that we want in our guts.
Yeah.
So don't just eat sauerkraut every day. It's good for you, but alternate the fermented foods. Part 4, Mrs. Patient, for 2 months, I want you to take a probiotic supplement. Now, I like the spores very much. They're great. So we recommend Megaspore, but any of the probiotics that are out there are beneficial. And so for 2 months, you know, I take it every day, but just 2 months. Part 5, get 10 apples, 5 to 10 apples. Always organic, because apples are number 3 on the dirty dozen, meaning commercial apples in general are loaded with toxic chemicals. So for you and your family, get organic whenever you can. Wash them, don't peel them. Chop them up, throw away the seeds, put them in a pan, add water to about 1/3 the height of the apples, add a little cinnamon, a couple of raisins if you want, turn it on high, let it boil. 10 to 12 minutes, when you look in, if there's a shine on the skin of the apples, it's done. You made applesauce. The shine is you've released the pectin from the meat and the skin of the apple, so it's on the surface. So as soon as you eat it, pectin's available right away. The pectin is the primary fuel for arguably the most important enzyme in your gut, is called intestinal alkaline phosphatase, IAP. IAP has so many benefits for you. It reduces insulin resistance, so you get better insulin sensitivity, meaning your blood sugar stays stable. It lowers high cholesterol in your blood. It lowers high triglycerides in your blood. It reduces the endotoxin, that LPS, that crud from gram-negative bacteria, by 73% from getting into your bloodstream, because it grabs it and it just escorts it out in the stool. It feeds the good bacteria, helping them dock and to colonize to make more good bacteria. It turns your genes on to fight the bad bacteria. Applesauce, this is why an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Yep.
This is why, because it works. And every day you have a tablespoon or 2 of fresh applesauce. The commercial stuff won't work. It's too old. So you and your family have the kids help you. You know, they're learning to make food that's healthier for them.
Yep.
You have a little bit of applesauce. So that 5-step process will rebuild a vibrant, dynamic microbiome that strengthens your immune system and helps protect you against any threats that you might have.
Absolutely beautiful, Tom. Look, thanks so much for sharing. Like, I think the science that you shared is super important for everyone here to understand as a baseline for why we think this is a big part of reducing the costs. And then obviously like the easy steps there. I think every family could be doing that, especially in this time where families are spending more time together, you know, working these kind of things out. We've been doing all kinds of science experiments in my house to do with fermenting and making things. And so we'll add that to the regimen. And, you know, I guess, you know, the thing that you and I have talked about for a long time is that, you know, we need to find ways to get people hooked into this way of thinking about their health. And
Yeah.
ultimately, you know, one of the things that I've seen is that as long as there's a, you know, as long as we follow the same pathway that we've always had, which is the best way to get started in functional medicine is to go to see a functional medicine doctor, we're going to limit the number of people. You make books, right? So that you can get the information out there. And ultimately, what I've been, you know, in the process of trying to work out for a long time is how do we make more access, more affordable access, to make it easier to people to, one, meet someone like them who they need to meet, who has reversed a chronic illness, right? So that they can guide them through, first being empowered enough to like make your own decisions, and then to go through a process of lifestyle transformation to bring those antibodies down and to get yourself to a point where you're not just a few years away from getting an unbelievably expensive and unbelievably annoying autoimmune disease. And so, you know, I guess I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done. And I just want to say to anyone who's watching, you know, we've created Find Functional as an affordable alternative, or as affordable, accessible starting point for functional medicine. And one of the most exciting things is we're going to be able to track everyone who comes through our program, to be able to see what happens when you implement these kind of things. And so we've made a special discount for your members, Tom, which is if they use the code THEDOCTOR, THEDR, in the code, they're going to get $50 off our initial program, which means that they can get started for $49, which is less than a copay. And
yeah, James, I'd like to say about that.
Yeah.
What thrills me so much is that you're the renegade out there who's always encouraging a bigger picture, and that the mechanisms that we're doing, functional medicine practitioners are able to help those who come to them and who have the resources to pay for the tests if insurance don't, and all that. And your big picture view is so necessary and needed. And you know, the idea of finding a health enthusiast to walk with you on this path and have group sessions. We've seen that it works so well with our friend Mark Hyman and the Daniel Plan. They, 250,000 pounds. They lost that much weight in, was it 6 months, I think, the group that went through there. It was 15,000 people. They lost 250,000 pounds. I mean, because of a community effort. And you've been talking about this for years. Yeah. And I'm so thrilled to see what you're doing now. And I want to encourage everyone to just consider, give this a shot, you know, and see if it helps empower you to make some of the basic changes without spending $1,000 on a bunch of tests, which is really important sometimes to do. But this starts the whole ballgame going. And that's why I wanted to talk about this 5-step process today for the gut, and to show you why it's important to do this. But you can do this at home for the cost of buying a few root vegetables and some apples. It's all it takes. And it can have a profound effect.
I think we're on the same page when it comes to, you know, to that conversation, and really just making it easy for people to make those kind of, you know, changes in their lives. And I guess I just, you know, I know that you've been pounding the pavement for years on this, and you're still doing it. And ultimately, look, we are aligned in the direction of that. You know, we want to make a big impact here. And, you know, before, you know, we've both probably got, you know, 20, 30 years left to make that kind of impact. And there's a lot of, you know, if we don't do it, we're only going to go over a sort of a fiscal cliff. And for a human, you know, there's human costs as well. So thank you for sharing, you know, so beautifully today. Thank you for all of your support over the years. And you can see, like, I'm not stopping until this is done. Same with you, I know. So thank you for your time today. And thank you everyone for watching and tuning in. We'll have all the details in the notes about how to get started. And we'll be back tomorrow. Actually, someone you know very well, Seth Congo. We're going to be talking about reversing. We're going to be talking about mild cognitive impairment en route to Alzheimer's. Similar conversation, and we're super excited to be sort of featuring leaders in the field who are serious about the business of reversing chronic disease. So thanks, Tom, and thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you guys soon.